Welcome to Face Forward, the podcast, the series that takes you behind the scenes of the riveting world of clinical trial management. I am your host, Valerie Coveney, and I am thrilled to be your guide on this journey through the nuances of planning, executing, and navigating the clinical research landscape. Okay, so we're thrilled to welcome back Dr. Anna Palijan, Indero's Director of Early Phase and Translational Research, for her second episode on Face Forward. With over 25 years of experience, she is dedicated to providing scientific, rigorous, and streamlined operations and study conduct. Today, she shares insight on how early phase studies have evolved beyond safety, the role of technology and oversight, and why every study demands a tailored approach. So here we are. Thank you, Anna, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love these. I love spending time with you.
I love having you on the podcast. It's always a blast. So here we go. Let's begin. So let's just start here with the safety component of early phase studies. What can you tell us?
Well, before diving in, let's define what we mean by early phase, right?
Yes.
You have your normal healthies. That's your SAD/MAD. This is the first time that you move your drug in a clinical space and you're testing your drug on humans, and then we call them normal healthies, volunteers. And then also we can define early phase as a phase 1B, 2A. This is when the first time you're moving into the patient population. So this is where you're going to, every drug will be, is targeting one specific disease or indication. So this is it. This is your 1B, usually where you're there. It's like this proof of concept study that we can call as well. So this is how I would define early phase, not just the normal healthies, but also that 1B, 2A that you will have. And what you have in common is your primary endpoint is going to be safety.
Okay. And how would you say this safety component has evolved maybe in the last decade?
I would say in the last decade, for sure, we saw a big shift. But there's a higher complexity now on trying to assess safety in trials for many reasons. I think one of them is the driver is our understanding of biology. With over 20, 30 years of the omics, being developed on the bench side, where we're discovering new signaling pathways or new targets of a signaling pathway, has allowed us, to even think to develop a drug that can target that. And then you also have our ability to design drugs that has changed completely because of the technology as well. Now we're having biologics. We're having bispecifics, all of these things, but it's beautiful. It can really better target the marker or the protein that you want to look at that has a role in the signaling pathway. But by doing that, let's say if I work with a bispecific, it means, well, now I have two possible targets that might have like a safety signal. And also where before, let's say we go back 30 years in dermatology, where I would have a lot of topical treatments, the good old traditional way. Today I have systemic treatments. So of course, also your absorption that you have in your body, you might have a different, not you might have, you have to look at the safety a different way to really better capture the safety of the patient and also to capture the safety profile of your drug as you're developing. So yes, for sure, I would say there is a big shift in the last decade, and also we see this as an increase in complexity of study design, how we think about it, how we also make sure that we're going to have capture well the safety signal and not put patient at risk, but also with quality inclusion exclusion criteria. You have to understand like the physiology and the disease so you can really better, everything comes together. But yes, protocols are a bit more complex, the study designs are more complex, the oversight needs to be able for you to capture the signal that's happening as well.
And talking about evolution, we have to talk definitely about technology, right? The advancement of technology and how and oversight and how these have contributed to the complexity of these early phase studies. Can you just explain for our listeners what's the link between the two? How are they influencing each other?
Absolutely. I think also that goes hand in hand that we were just saying. So if I have a drug that has a more complex, not complex signal, but I have to have a better ability, oversight to see what is a safety profile. Therefore, I need to work with tools that allow me to capture this signal if
Mm-hmm.
there's a signal, right? So I think there is this the complexity of technology that's there. Of course, same thing, big boom. The last years, we see also, and all our systems that we're using in clinical trials has changed a lot. You can see that what 20 years ago, the concept of being versus paper source,
Mm-hmm.
example, has changed. What before was a myth or division, today is reality. So yeah, so we have the need to have better tools to capture the signal that we're looking at, to have this proper oversight. But also, I think um, technology itself has grown, and we have systems that are put in place to help us conduct clinical
Mm.
trials, to help us to ease the workload, to lower the admin aspect of clinical trials that tend to be heavy. But when you look at that, I think today there's still a lot of work to be done. Example, okay, now
Yes.
I'm rattling a little bit, but let's say example is today what's really cool. We can have these ecosystems where
Mm.
you can have this one source where you're going to have like the ETMF that talks to the CTMS that talks to the EDC. Everything talks together. This is beautiful. So you have this ecosystem. So you're supposed to have this easiness of information being transferred from one system to the other automatically, which is great. Um, are we there yet? It's happening, but I think there's in the next coming years is going to get a lot better because there's still a lot of roadblocks in these systems and how these systems are connected. If you have an update in one system and then doesn't talk to the other one, it can break that bridge and then you won't have that
Mm.
transfer information. So there's a lot of tech maintenance cost that comes in this. Also, your setup of the systems now is more intricate, it's more complex, and all your UAT and your test scripts, how do you make sure that there's no gaps happening in those systems? So it's almost like technology is there to help us make our lives easier. However, it is heavier to implement. And also, some can argue that when you move into more of these technology advanced systems, sometimes you're also limited
Mm.
because using something off the shelf will be a lot easier to implement versus if you have to, customize it for your study need or study design. So it's almost, I also feel there's a shift in the expertise and the people doing it. Also in our field, there's a shift right now. You have to be very tech savvy as a project manager to properly understand how everything is connected, how everything works, how you're setting up during your startup, what are the critical elements that are going to be driver of your critical path, for your timeline. So all of that gets together and just, I'm talking all over the place. I'm just saying that there's pros and cons. We're heading in the right direction. Having these ecosystems where you have one provider providing everything has its pluses, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes also limiting. I always like to use this analogy of, those printers all in one with a fax and a scanner and a printer.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, there's one machine that does it all. But do they do the best of the all? Is you're
Mm.
printing the highest resolution? No, if you get a printer that's purely just a printer, there you can have the high res and the color and all that stuff. It's the same thing here. So you're a bit more limited. But then if you go with individual systems that are the best at doing what they're meant to be, then you get the complexity of how can I connect them all?
Exactly.
And this is where you can have issues with API and all that stuff. And the setup, and also your cost goes up because now I'm buying multiple systems and trying to incorporate them into one trial versus using an ecosystem. So yeah, so technology does have a role there, but I think as a whole we're headed in the right direction. And also I think it is needed for multiple reasons. Like it started a conversation, we need this oversight,
Mm.
and technology offers this for us. Studies now are not small like what they used to. We're global now.
Yeah.
When you work, around the world, how do I get this data in? How can I make sure that this data is of the quality that I want and so forth? So you need to have this technology there. So yeah.
Okay. Very nice. So let's shift a little bit here to the uniqueness of each study and the trend of big pharma outsourcing small studies to niche CROs. What can you tell our listeners about this?
Yes, so I think this is it goes with the market. We see the cycling, right? And in business, you'll have at one point it's better to go to experts to run your trials,
Mm,
and then you're gonna have this shift where, well, maybe it's better for to keep everything in-house, more efficient.
yeah,
But then that drives up your costs, and then sometimes, it's cyclic. I feel it's like every 10, 15 years you'll have this outsource insource
it's
waves,
trends. Yeah.
yeah, these trends. I feel now, as a lot of these big pharmas are big and global, and also are very varied, and the disease and indications, the portfolio is vast. That's what I'm saying, is
Mm-hmm.
diverse. Um, People are realizing that cookie cutter is not the answer to all.
Mm,
You have to think of the context. Cookie cutter can be good in a specific context, or where, A plus B equals C. But when you have many different diseases in your portfolio, and every disease has its specific ways needed to conduct a trial, it's you gain a lot more benefit by going to a niche CRO or to experts at running that. You de-risk because A, they know the field, B, they know how to aim for the data quality that you need. So at the end of the trial, you have reliable, clear signal to drive your program development. You won't have that noise where you're not sure how you can take the decision because, you have unclear data talking to you. And I feel this is what the field is seeing right now,
mm.
that for these early phase studies where you have a smaller population, like example, I'll just talk about us. If
Yes.
I look at specifically at dermatology, um, inflammatory dermatology indications, if I have a trial, I'm only looking at about 30 or 40 patients. Every data point is critical, is important. If not,
Mm-hmm.
I lose a data point, I won't have my signal that I need to look, to see safety or see a hint of efficacy. So yes, so to answer your question, what we're seeing with pharma, I think with pharma that appreciate this knowledge, this
Mm-hmm.
expertise, and for them it's more cost effective to work with experts of the field. And also, and then by them outsourcing this activity, they can invest in their R&D, go back to the
Yeah.
bench,
Mm-hmm.
or they can invest in analyzing data they get, let's say, from biomarkers, or then also when they have other assets in their pipeline that moves to market, then they can also invest money to that. So, so there is a clear trend there, and I think it's mutual beneficial to have that.
Okay, so what else would you see personally as a driver to the complexity of early phase that maybe we haven't covered today?
That's a good question. I feel, well, early phase, it's a whole different beast.
Mm,
I love early phase studies. I think you always hear me gushing about it, because this is our first time going into the clinical space. We're developing the program. Me as a CRO, I get to interact, with the clients, and really having this close partnership of saying, okay, how can we design this? How can we put this together to really capture the signal we're looking at? Like what's the question that we're asking here? Like, it's like what's the business need and what's the scientific need? So I just love that. But I also feel, to go back to what I was saying, the majority also of clients are biotechs.
mm,
And when you're biotech growing, it's such a high risk field. It's awesome. You're moving to the clinical space. This is big. You spend like almost a decade in your R&D at the bench developing your IP. Now you're moving to this huge, huge milestone in development to the patient population in the clinical space, which is awesome. But most of these companies are very small. They're more R&D, or it's a biotech where the business model is I bought a molecule, an asset, and I'm going to bring it to the clinic. And usually what you'll see, it's a smaller team. It's a smaller company, and sometimes they're not brick and mortar type of thing. They're
Mm.
like more virtual
Yeah.
companies
Mm-hmm.
across the world, and they capture these experts, key people to drive this company forward. But what they also do is they would hire consultants, because
Oh.
this is the business model that you would tend to have. Like some key roles you hire as a consultant, and later on they can be converted as your employee. And when you look at our field today, now you have a lot of experts out there who have over 20, 30 years of experience developing and putting to market drugs under the belt.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, these are very experienced people that will turn as a consultant, before you hit retirement, or even young people do a whole career just as consulting,
Mm.
because we are now global. The science now is global, and companies are global, small or big. Um, and I feel that this is my point of view. Sometimes you can have a raise in complexity, not necessarily in study design in early phase, but maybe how to conduct early phase studies, because we have these higher ratio of people who have this advanced many years experience who were also doing phase threes.
Mm.
Now moving into the biotech world where you are with the phase 1Bs, right? And the requirements for a phase three versus a 1B are different. Like in the case of a phase three, you're managing massive volume of data.
Mm-hmm.
The question is different. You want to prove that your drug is safe and is efficacious, the mass volume. As for Endo 1B, I'm going to be working only with 40, 50 subjects. So when you're trying to operationalize a small study, it's different. Well, I use that really big system that costs me a quarter of a mil when I'm only looking at 30 subjects?
Mm-hmm.
Most likely no. But when you come from decades of working with the big systems, it is an adjustment to then think, okay, the wallet is smaller. The question is different. The need is different. The must is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's really identifying that must. And so I think that everything, like we said from the beginning, right? We have understanding of biology changed, is more advanced. Our ability to develop drugs and the way of delivering administration is more advanced. All of that requiring a better oversight
Mm-hmm.
during study conduct. We have the technology advancements now, where you're going to have like these ecosystems or different systems connecting together to the oversight. And there's also the human factor, I find, where when you bring different knowledge to the table, sometimes there might be an adjustment needed to, okay, what is the need in this context versus another context? That can also be a driver. And the
Mm.
complexity that we're seeing in recent years, like a shift to more complex. Yeah.
Amazing. So, Anna, this completes our episode. It was such a nice time. I feel like we covered such important points today and really brought a visibility to the early phase and like how it's shifting and evolving. So, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
As we conclude another illuminating episode of Face Forward, we find ourselves at the crossroads of science and progress. Remember that behind the jargon and statistics lie stories of unwavering commitment, meticulous observation, and the pursuit of evidence that shapes our understanding of health and disease. Stay at the forefront of knowledge and innovation and follow Face Forward on your preferred platform. My name is Valerie Kovney. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.